News channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Very good morning and welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Nadeem Zahawi embroiled in a tax scandal, Boris plagued by questions over an £800,000 loan and a BBC executive, and Rishi Sunak not bothering to wear his seatbelt. Why do this Conservative government feel like they can act with impunity? Let me know your thoughts. And we're being encouraged to turn off our electricity today between 5 and 6 o'clock. National Grid call the scheme a demand flexibility service. I call it blackmailing you, the customer, to change your behaviour rather than simply providing you with a good service at a competitive price. Do you agree? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Oh, and I won an award. Thanks a lot. I'll tell you about it in a minute. All that and more after a look at the latest news.
Good morning, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB Newsroom. It's 1 minute past 10. A source close to Nadeem Zahawi says he won't quit as Tory party chair despite growing pressure over his tax affairs. The former Chancellor has admitted he paid a penalty to HMRC following an error over shares in the polling company YouGov, which he co-founded. He hasn't disclosed the size of the settlement, which is believed to be almost £5 million. Labour wants the Prime Minister to sack him and come clean over whether he knew about the incident when he appointed him party chairman. Thousands of ambulance workers are striking for the third time in 5 weeks. Unison and GMB union members across England and Wales have walked out, along with staff at 2 hospital trusts in Liverpool. Further industrial action is planned in the coming weeks by nurses and other NHS workers. Union leaders are calling for fair pay, accusing the government of not wanting to find a resolution. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the action is hugely disappointing and warned patients of disruption. A 72-year-old man suspected of carrying out a mass shooting in California has been found dead by police. 10 people believed to be in their 50s and 60s were killed celebrating the Chinese Lunar New Year in Monterey Park near Los Angeles at the weekend. 10 others were injured. Detectives say the suspect, Hu Can Tran, took his own life around 12 hours after the attack. Members of the public who intervened were praised by the county sheriff.
The weapon that was recovered from the Alhambra location, in which, remember, the suspect went to the Alhambra location after he conducted the shooting, and he was disarmed by 2 community members who I consider to be heroes because they saved lives.
Households with smart meters could receive discounts if they cut their energy use during peak times today. After successful trials, National Grid is launching its demand flexibility scheme for the first time between 5 and 6 o'clock. 26 suppliers are signed up to the initiative. It's also ordered 3 coal plants to begin warming up as a contingency, with forecasters predicting supplies could be squeezed during today's cold snap. The energy regulator is launching a review of the checks and balance companies used to place customers on prepayment meters. Ofgem is threatening legal action if they don't take due care in the process. The chief executive says the number of people forced onto prepayment meters is extremely high and vulnerable customers shouldn't be left in the dark and cold during winter. Experts are warning the recession expected to hit the UK could be twice as bad as previously thought. Economists at consultancy firm EY say the outlook has become gloomier, with the country facing less government support and higher taxes. Despite cutting deeper than first forecast, the firm doesn't expect it will last longer than originally predicted. Boris Johnson has made a surprise visit to Ukraine. The former Prime Minister, who met President Zelensky in the capital Kyiv, said Britain would stick by the country for as long as it takes. The pair also walked the streets of war-torn Bucha, where hundreds of people were killed during Russian attacks. A charity is calling on the government to commit to eliminating cervical cancer. Joe's Cervical Cancer Trust says screening for the disease is at its lowest level in 20 years. The organisation wants home testing kits to be offered in a bid to reduce the number of no-shows for screenings. Over 3,000 women are diagnosed with cervical cancer and more than 800 die from the disease each year in the UK. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Thanks for joining us. Here's what's coming up this morning. Ambulance workers are staging fresh strikes today in their ongoing dispute over pay and working conditions. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, said it was hugely disappointing, but that constructive talks were held regarding a pay settlement for 2023 to 24. I'm going to be speaking to Labour MP Khalid Mahmood, who supports a general strike, to see what he thinks. And I'm going to be looking also at the Conservative Party and their misdemeanours. Rishi Sunak has been fined by the police for not wearing a seatbelt. Party chairman Nadhim Zahawi is being urged to reveal all about his taxes, etc., etc. Do you think this government is acting with integrity? That integrity, of course, that Rishi Sunak promised to you. And the author, Dr. Tessa Dunlop, and the broadcaster, Andrew Eborn, will be joining me for the next 2 hours for some lively discussions about the biggest news stories of the day. Of course, you are my third panellist. Don't forget to vote in our poll this morning on Twitter, please. I'm asking you, as households with smart meters are offered discounts if they cut their energy use between 5 and 6 o'clock today, will you be turning the heating off this evening? And if not, why? So far, 80% of you will not be turning off your power so far. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews to have your say. It's interesting, that electricity story, isn't it? I'd love to know your reasons why you are being reluctant to follow this directive to turn down your heating between 5 and 6 today. Now, ambulance workers, represented by 3 union bodies, are striking today in the escalating dispute over understaffing and pay. London, Yorkshire, the North West, the North East and the South West will all be affected, although life and limb emergency cover, as it's called, will remain in place. Last month, the Labour MP for Perry Barr, Khalid Mahmood, said he would support a general strike, and he joins me now. Good morning, Khalid. Obviously, you said this a little while ago. How do you feel now? Do you still think that we need a concerted effort to bring together a general strike, or have you softened your view on that?
No, I think simply the government has got to get its act together. It's got to get to dealing with the issues of the unions. They just brought through a legislation trying to set minimal levels of service during strikes. But the fact that the government itself is not providing minimal service levels for the ambulance service. People are waiting for hours and hours before they get the ambulance to turn up because they haven't got sufficient people to do that. These people have suffered for the last decade working in the ambulance service. They are very crucial people to our National Health Service, and the government has clear disregard for that.
I was talking last week to the representative of the Welsh Ambulance Service, and he was arguing that actually the ambulance strikers are not just striking for them. He said the ambulance system isn't working because the health and social care system, if you like, at the top of our health system is failing dramatically, and therefore it's the blocking of the beds which is leading to the ambulances having to strike. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with that, but there is a significant shortage of personnel within the ambulance service. We haven't got enough people to cover the service as it is. And he's quite right in terms of the National Health Service and social care, particularly, I think, the belligerent attitude that Rishi Sunak has towards the National Health Service, including the ambulance service, is that I think he wants to push to ensure that he can start to privatise elements of the National Health Service because he'll say, oh, well, look, we can't provide this service because these people striking. They're not prepared to speak to the National Health Service, to the nurses and to the ambulance services to be able to sit down and have a proper, decent negotiation and get on with the job and let people carry on doing what they want to do, which is to serve the people.
Former Labour Prime Minister Gordon Brown has been writing in The Guardian today to say that exactly what you've just said there. This is what's going on. This is privatisation by stealth. So are you saying that you're doubling down on that accusation, that the government could do something here, but they're allowing this to run its course so that they can start to privatise sections inevitably?
Absolutely. I mean, look, if he's not, before the strike started, before Christmas, all the nurses said, the union said, is come and speak to us, get us in a room, start talking to us, and we will not strike. And they couldn't even be bothered to do that. That's complete complacency and belligerence, and that's what this government is about.
Is it also, though, Khalid Mahmood, is it also the fact that this is playing beautifully into the hands of Labour? A lot of these unionists are Labour members as well. And they obviously know that these strikes cast the Conservative Party in a very dim light. It does make it look like there might be time for a change of government. Is that partly at play here?
Well, there's a need to change the government, but this is not a game that the Labour Party is happy about. Labour Party wants to see people served in the National Health Service. This is a crucial thing, matter of life and death. And we don't want to play a game with that. What we want to do is to ensure the hospitals, the National Health Service, the ambulance service run effectively to serve the people, our constituents. OK,
Khalid Mahmood, MP, thank you ever so much for joining us this morning, giving us your opinion on that. What do you think? GBviews at gbnews.uk is the email address, and you can also tweet me at GBnews. I'll get to as many of them as I can throughout the show. OK, moving on. Back in October, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak addressed the nation for the first time, promising that his government would have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. Well, this weekend, it seems like the Tories are still behaving badly. Sunak himself was caught not wearing a seatbelt in the back of the car. He got fined for it. And Nadeem Zahawi is said to be determined to stay on as Conservative Party chairman amid calls for his resignation after details of a multi-million-pound tax dispute emerged. Let's talk to Claire Pearsall now, former Special Home Office advisor and current Conservative councillor. Good morning, Claire.
Morning.
I was looking at some of the misdemeanours of this Conservative Party, and you just need to do a cursory Google this morning to come up with dozens and dozens and dozens of instances where MPs, Conservative MPs, have behaved with what seems to be apparent complete disregard for public opinion, never mind ethics or the law. Why?
Well, I think this has been something that's happened throughout time with politicians as a whole. I don't necessarily think it's just Conservatives. It's more important at the moment because they are the governing party of the country. So therefore, the public quite rightly believe that they should be acting above the law and be whiter than white and absolutely have integrity. And unfortunately, what we've seen is a drip, drip, drip of information. Over the last 3 years, in reality, it has just been chaos after chaos and leak after leak. And it doesn't do the world of politics any good. It certainly doesn't do the Conservative Party any good. And my concern is what is coming next, because it doesn't seem that they've got a handle on it. It seems that every single day something else is coming out and nobody is on top of it.
let's look at them individually then. You've got Nadeem Zahawi at the moment embroiled in this accusation that he deliberately didn't pay tax. He says it was an oversight and he's a successful man and you can easily just not pay a few million quid to HMRC. It's easily done, apparently. Does that stack up for you?
Well, no, it doesn't. And I think the real question that needs to be asked is, when did this happen? Who knew about it? If there is a question over whether the negotiations with HMRC took place while Nadeem Zahawi was Chancellor, that is incredibly serious. That needs to be investigated and it needs to be done quickly. What we can't have is that rumbling on. So I would hope that Rishi Sunak is there looking through all of the documents and getting absolutely everything in line to deal with that particular issue, because it's always the cover-up that gets politicians in the end. It's not necessarily the scandal that is out there. It is the cover-up that goes wrong and it just makes it worse.
We've got Boris. It's so true, Claire, because when you say that, I hope that Rishi Sunak is looking at all of the documents and the paperwork and coming to a conclusion. My heart sinks that actually that is going to be the Conservative Party policing the Conservative Party. And myself, and I'm sure lots of people watching and listening to this, will also have faith, will have very little faith that that would find what might be misdemeanours, which should be clamped down on. Boris Johnson as well, of course. It transpired over the weekend that he took an £800,000 loan negotiated for him by a man that eventually got a very powerful job in the BBC. How bad does that look?
Well, it all is incredibly damaging. And there is no sugarcoating this, that this kind of bad behaviour with Conservatives and money has to stop. And I think the public are so fed up now when they see a former Prime Minister looking at getting loans of £800,000 and then somebody gets a very high-powered job, as you've just said. That looks wrong. It looks corrupt. So the whole thing needs tidying up. The whole politics level of it needs tidying up. And I think the real issue is we don't know exactly what went on. It hasn't been clarified. Now, Nadeem Zahawi had an opportunity to do that at the weekend and put out a very lengthy and complicated statement, which really didn't answer any questions. So I would hope that this morning we lay out exactly what's gone on, because until you do that, these stories are going to keep coming up. The speculation is going to be rife, and we are just handing this now to the opposition to pile into us.
Yeah, the latest on that is that Labour have asked the watchdog to examine the recruitment process because of Richard Sharp helping the PM. It was when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, helping with his finances before he became BBC chairman. On a much more trivial matter, Claire, is this footage of Rishi Sunak in the back of the car doing a little video without his seatbelt on. Now, a lot of people have trivialised this and said, well, it's kind of not particularly important, is it? I personally think it is quite important, because I think the tone deafness of whoever was in that car with him and whoever's filming him to not say, look, there's a perception that you lot all operate outside the rules. You've got to put your seatbelt on whether you like it or not, because you are just playing into the hands. How do they not see it?
I mean, that's the question I've been speaking about this weekend with friends and family, is when that was me, when I was an advisor and I was out with the minister, you would look at absolutely everything. If you were doing a piece of video or a photograph, you would look at the background. You would think, are there any signs there? Are there any people around? What is the minister wearing? So to have a Prime Minister in the back of the car with a no seatbelt, how did no one spot that to begin with? And also that video would have gone through several pairs of hands before it made it out onto the internet, and nobody spotted it. Now, you as a parent, Bev, will appreciate that. How many times have you told your children, this car isn't moving until that seatbelt is on? The same thing really should apply to a Prime Minister.
And you know what my kids are going to say to me now, Claire Pearsall? They're going to say, well, the Prime Minister doesn't have to wear his seatbelt in the back. Mummy, neither do I. That's the problem. Right, Claire Pearsall, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Let me know what you think as well. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. You probably think that Rishi Sunak not wearing his seatbelt is kind of trivial. And I know that it definitely is compared to perhaps tax evasion. But still, Do you know what I'm saying about the fact that it looks like they don't have to operate within the same parameters that we do as the public? Also, give me a vote in our Twitter poll, won't you? I am asking you that as households with smart meters could receive discounts. We're going to be digging into this a little bit more. Liam Halligan's going to be here as well to explain how it works, who does it apply to, etc. But I'm asking you whether you would turn your heating off for a financial incentive from your electricity company. At the moment, 82% of you have said no. But that is because you're a contrary lot, and that's why I love you. GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBnews. Now, after the break, we're going to get stuck into something for nothing culture. It's all over the front of the papers today. A new report says that Britons are more dependent on the state than ever. More Britons are taking more from the state than they're putting in than at any other time in history. Why? Author Dr. Tessa Dunlop and broadcaster Andrew Eborn will be with me to discuss that in just a moment. Now, though, time for the very important weather on a very cold day.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A bit of a north-south split with the weather at the moment. Scotland and Northern Ireland fairly cloudy, but milder air has arrived here. Still very cold across England and Wales, but many areas sunny thanks to this area of high pressure. Around the top of it, though, low pressure systems, weather fronts just dancing across Scotland and Northern Ireland, bringing cloud but not too much in the way of rain. Damp and drizzly in southwest Scotland, parts of the far northwest of England too, and some rain across the far north, but otherwise, as I said, dry. We've seen some thick fog through this morning over parts of southeast England. That'll only slowly clear. Some places may keep it all day. And quite cloudy conditions just brushing into the east of East Anglia and across the far southeast. It's cold in the south, 5-6 degrees if the fog sticks, barely getting above freezing, but double figures across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where the cloud persists and will keep a bit more drizzly rain across the far northwest overnight. Elsewhere further south, again, likely to see some thick fog patches in this zone from northeast England down to southwest Wales, southwest England to East Anglia. That's also the zone where it'll be coldest and frosty. A bit more cloud in the southeast means it won't be quite as cold perhaps here as last night. And another fairly mild one across Scotland and Northern Ireland, where again, tomorrow's mostly cloudy with patchy rain, but northeast Scotland may well see some brightness. Sunny spells developing for a good chunk of England and Wales, quite cloudy in the far southeast. Again, some stubborn fog patches both in the morning and perhaps lingering all day, keeping the temperatures at freezing. Even where it's sunny in the south, only 4 or 5 degrees, whereas further north, double figures, perhaps even milder than today, 11, perhaps even 12 Celsius. We'll keep that contrast going through Tuesday evening as well. There's a weather front just across the far north pushing in as we go into Wednesday. That will mix things up a little bit, bringing some patchy rain south into parts of northern England in particular during Wednesday, and slowly switching the temperature, so turning a little milder in the south, meanwhile turning colder further north.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel.
And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Very good morning. It's 10:24. This is Bev Turner today on GB News, on the TV and on DAB radio. Let me introduce my guest to you this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by author and historian Dr. Tessa Dunlop and a broadcaster and futurist Andrew Eborn, and lawyer. We can still call you a lawyer.
You can call me a lawyer, absolutely.
I can call you anything I want. I want an award.
I am so impressed. You know, aspirational figure personality of the year. I love it. It's got to be good.
I'm using it to my advantage this morning. Believe me, I've got the boys to polish the award, go and get me a croissant. They said it's going to my house.
You got a croissant?
I got a croissant, but I haven't eaten since last night, so don't give me too much of a hard time about that. Right. What is happening to this country, Tessa Dunlop? Front page of the Daily Mail, the shocking rise of the something-for-nothing Britain. Over half of households get more from the state than they pay in tax, while the top 10% of earners account for 53% of all income tax. What's going on?
As it should be. This is just, forgive me, but talk about dog whistle. This is just designed to get people jumping up and down in their armchairs. Oh, it's shocking. It's not shocking. It's absolutely predictable. Let's just take the second part of the subheadline. Top 10% of earners account for 53% of all income tax.
Right.
But half the nation's wealth sits with the top 10% of the richest. Not necessarily earners, but your asset-rich group. Half of our nation's wealth in just top 10%. So we'd expect them to be taxed.
Yes,
equivocably. Then let's go for the something-for-nothing cost of Britain. Well, I will have you know, Bev, I work 9 to 5. I do my Dolly Parton every day. I've got 2 children of infant and school age. And this something-for-nothing is suggesting not those who are sitting on benefits. By the way, you can't stand on benefits. You can only ever sit on them, all right? Including our use of the NHS and, for example, state education. So, breaking news, I am a something-for-nothing citizen, because I definitely receive more at the moment because of my children being in state education than I pay in tax.
But the division between those who contribute more and take more has steadily gone up. That is the trajectory, OK? And I want... Andrew Eborn, I want a smaller state. I want them to just deregulate, let businesses run, let us run our lives, and stop acting with such a kind of patrician role in the lives of people. Something has gone wrong with people expecting something.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And this is what they've said and what they're claiming. Ian Duncan Smith has come out and said, look, lockdown changed the psyche of the British people.
It did.
And I think you've sort of work at it, going back to the Norman Tebbit, get on your bike and go and get some sort of work. But there's a difference. And what Tessa says is right, because there are some people who go out and work all the hours under the sun. They don't earn as much as some of the top rate of tax people, but they're not scroungers. They're not the Daily Mail sponging off the state. This is more about the psyche of the British people. What is going to incentivise people to get out there and work? And you'll recall that Jeremy Hunt, he changed the boundaries, if you like, about taxpayers and so on and so forth. So it used to be the top threshold, 45%, was 150,000. That's now been brought down to 125,140. So basically, more people who are earning 150,000 were paying £1,243 more in tax. What you need to do is give people the incentive to get out and work.
Yes, there's not enough of that, is there, Tessa?
I think it's quite lazy of the Conservative government to blame the one thing that wasn't fully in their control, the coronavirus crisis. Actually, we've shrunk our economy. I know I'm not allowed to say the word on GB News, but no prizes for guessing why our economy shrunk by 5% more than any other country, incidentally, in the Western world.
You can blame Brexit for that.
Yeah, Brexit has shrunk the economy. So aside from that, the pound in our pocket goes less far. It gets less in terms of the export market. And globally, energy prices have rocketed and expect them to stay high in the long term, even without a war in the Ukraine. That means that the pound goes less far. That means that more of us...
But it's the quantitative easing that's pushed the inflation. The fact that we were printing money...
That too, that's COVID.
But that was COVID policy.
That's COVID. So,
that's separate from the virus.
But my point is, it's not just COVID, but all of it means that previously, in the Blair years, for example, when our economy was booming, much stronger than most on the continent, stripping ahead, very strong pound, we actually felt pretty well off on 2 household salaries. So my husband and I, middle earners, yeah, man. But now it's like, whew, OK, we've made the end of the month.
That's because they were flogging all the gold and spending everything. And as they said when they left, there's nothing left in the bank.
And that was that comedy note they put in the thing, as you said.
Yeah.
But it is extraordinary. It's up from 24 million under Tony Blair, 2/5 of households is what they were saying beforehand. It's now 36 million is what they're claiming, which is about more than half. But we need to look at what it actually means. So get beneath the headlines and about that sort of stuff. Because how much does education cost? How much does health cost? How much do the roads? All the things that you throw into the equation.
How much of the and the fact that the benefit fraud now is believed to have rocketed to £8.5 billion a year,
including the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who's just paid a £1 million fine. Whoopsie!
But it wasn't benefit fraud. Like, there's a real difference. I think there is a problem. There is culturally a problem for some young people, particularly, who are in a benefits culture. And like you were saying, Andrew, about how do we incentivise those kids to aim higher and work?
Incidentally,
and get a
though,
job?
one of the big jumps are those over 50 in the post-COVID world, claiming benefit. But can we blame them entirely when you've got NHS waiting lists of 18 months? If you can't get your hip replacement, you can't work.
But there is
actually, where do you... What bit of the state do you prioritise? Do you mend the NHS to mend people to get them back to work?
But it feels like in order to avoid being criticised for being cruel, the Tories are just dead set now on this role of handing out, I will look after you. Of course, we need a welfare state to catch those people who are desperately, and they are increasing by the day.
Yes.
But psychologically, something has happened between how we feel about the state. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
You're absolutely right, Bev, and I think this is the problem with the headlines. If you label everybody as a scrounger, those are 53% basically, they're all scroungers.
Including me.
Exactly, especially. I think you were top of the list.
Very much. And by the way, the phone, thanks all. In lieu of a fee.
But the problem is you're not dealing with the mischief. And the mischief is those who are abusing the system. That's the real thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look at those people who are...
Or not even abusing it. It's those who just see it as a way of life.
It's the psyche. This is what, as I say, the psyche. Has that changed?
This is society-wide, and it's why you can't exempt Nazim at the top from the kid at the bottom. All of us now feel, why should I do something for nothing?
Oh, I hate the phrase, why should I?
But I think that permeates society, and that people think, oh, what does it matter if politicians behave badly? It does, because it sets the national tone.
It really does.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that in our next section, guys, but quick break now. Will you be turning your electricity off this evening during the cold snap? The National Grid are offering discounts on people's bills who cut electricity use between 5 and 6 o'clock. GB News' business and economics editor Liam Halligan will explain the detail of that for us after your morning's news with Tamsin.
Bev, thank you. Here are the headlines from the GB newsroom. It's 10:31. A source close to Nadeem Zahawi says he won't quit as Tory party chair despite growing pressure over his tax affairs. The former Chancellor has admitted he paid a penalty to HMRC following an error over shares in the polling company YouGov, which he co-founded. He hasn't disclosed the size of the settlement, which is believed to be almost £5 million. Labour wants the Prime Minister to sack him and come clean over whether he knew about the incident when he appointed him party chairman. Thousands of ambulance workers are striking for the third time in 5 weeks. Unison and GMB union members across England and Wales have walked out, along with staff at 2 hospital trusts in Liverpool. Further industrial action is planned in the coming weeks by nurses and other NHS workers. Union leaders are calling for fair pay, accusing the government of not wanting to find a resolution. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the action is hugely disappointing and warned patients of disruption. A 72-year-old man suspected of carrying out a mass shooting in California has been found dead by police. 10 people believed to be in their 50s and 60s were killed celebrating the Chinese Lunar New Year in Monterey Park near Los Angeles at the weekend. 10 others were injured. Detectives say the suspect, Hu Can Tran, took his own life around 12 hours after the attack. Households with smart meters could receive discounts if they cut their energy use during peak times today. After successful trials, National Grid is launching its demand flexibility scheme between 5 and 6 p.m. 26 suppliers are signed up to the initiative. It's also ordered 3 coal plants to begin warming up as a contingency, with forecasters predicting supplies could be squeezed during today's cold snap. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good morning. It's 10:36 on Monday. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you for your messages. Lots of you saying congratulations on my award. Thank you. I take it as an award for the whole channel, and I thank you for voting for me if you did. And then we're talking about politicians, and Fraser has said it just proves that these people who run our country are so out of touch with the real world. They haven't got a clue how people really live. Like thinking a pensioner can live on £185 a week. They spend more than that on lunch every day. I was asking you about whether you are also fed up with the Conservative politicians, or politicians almost, in fact, seem to behave with impunity. Right. OK, households across the UK could be in line for payouts if they reduce their energy usage this evening in order to stave off nationwide blackouts. At least that's the reason we're given. National Grid is expected to pay out over £1 million to households who reduce their usage between 5 and 6 o'clock. Now, economics and business editor Liam Halligan is here to explain this to me. I don't like it, Liam Halligan. Why don't I like it?
OK, this is a cold snap. When I got on my motorcycle this morning to drive to the station...
Your motorcycle?
The little gauge said -8. I was pretty cold. It was a cold weekend. And so the National Grid have warned that this evening there's no chance of a blackout, but their buffer zone is smaller than they'd like it to be, so they're taking action. Not only are they asking coal-fired power plants to be standing by, you can, rev them up quite quickly, which is ironic. They're also launching this scheme in England, Scotland and Wales. It means if you're signed up, you have to be signed up. You have to be with one of these 26 providers. Crucially, you need a smart meter, but if you've been canny enough and sharp-elbowed enough to have signed up, then depending on your general usage, you can save between £10 and £20 this evening by deliberately using less energy, so compared to the previous pattern of your usage. So there are lots of stipulations, there's lots of nitty-gritty fine print and so on, but it is the National Grid saying that they want people to get on smart meters. It's a way of recruiting people to get onto smart meters. And they're saying if this cold snap continues today, then they may extend this scheme to tomorrow as well. So you've got to get on the site of your electricity provider, if you've got a smart meter, to see if they're one of the 26 that are participating.
Well, Craig Dyke, head of national control at the National Grid ESO, suggested the measure could become a regular part of the UK winter, not just this year. It's something we strongly believe in. It provides flexibility for the system and the consumer. We see this as a growing market. It's a world-leading step towards net zero.
It's also geopolitical as well. The government is signalling to the outside world, particularly Russia, that we can deal with issues. You know, haven't got much gas storage in this country, as people like me have been warning for many years. That means we don't have as much buffer reserve as the Germans and the Dutch, so on. We don't have big nuclear plants like the French, though they've had some trouble with their nuclear plants, haven't they? We have got gas-fired power stations, and we have got some coal-fired power stations still, and we've got renewables. But a lot of this also depends, Bev, on the wholesale price for gas, which drives those turbines and sets the benchmark right across. Weirdly, you know, the price of energy generated by renewables is benchmarked to the price of energy generated by gas.
Crazy.
And as you say, in the summer, at one point, wholesale gas prices on European markets were around 330 euros per megawatt hour. They're now down at 63 euros per megawatt hour. They're down from 150 just before Christmas. And yet, the energy price cap that the government sets is currently £2.5 per household. In April, it's meant to go up to £3,000. I don't think that's politically sustainable.
It's not. And people will be saying, what's wrong with that Bev Turner whinging about these smart meters? The problem is it's a change, a significant change in our behaviour that we're being nudged towards all the time by big corporate entities and government. And I don't feel that we are the ones that are going to be at an advantage.
The big thing is when you get a smart meter, then it may be that your energy company, as in the case of my household, and I know yours as well, we've spoken about it, then starts taking money off you up front. So they've got several £1,000s of my and my partner's money.
Yeah, that they're taken from direct debit.
Yeah.
With a view to giving.
And if the company goes bust, will we get that back? We don't know. And why are they sitting on several £1,000s of mine when that's my money? I could be doing something with that. I may need it for my family. But it's a big day for energy, Bev, because there's also this story about prepayment meters, of course. Now, what percentage of British households do you think have a prepayment meter?
More than you would think.
13%, which is big. 1 in 7, 1 in 8.
Yes,
this is a lot. And we know from the excellent Citizens Advice Bureau that every year around 3.2 million households run out of energy on their prepayment meter, which is one every 10 or 15 seconds. And in a situation where it's cold, the idea you might not have heat, you might not have lights, and you might have kids, you might be disabled, you might have equipment that relies on electricity that is life-supporting it in some senses. We're an ageing society. Means there is now a focus on the extent to which energy companies are forcing people onto prepayment meters if they've got a record of poor credit or they're on benefits or disadvantaged in some other way. And that's why over the weekend the government has warned, and Ofgem is now warning this morning, that they are keeping a close eye on what companies are doing, making sure that people who are on prepayment meters are looked after during this difficult situation.
It's a bit like we were just talking about then about the relationship between the state and the individual and the psychological kind of interplay of the two. I'm sort of appalled that in 2023 people are being held to ransom by these big corporations as to whether they can and cannot heat their house and put the cooker on to make the kids tea.
I think there is definitely a very, very big political crisis looming, because oil and gas prices are now well below where they were before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine in February 2022. And yet petrol and particularly diesel prices haven't come down very much at all.
No.
And it seems that utility bills are going up.
Why are we not hearing enough about that?
Because the media thinks it's too complicated and they want to talk about cats and celebrities all the time. That's why it's difficult for people like me to get on the telly and talk about this stuff. But I think people desperately want to hear honest facts and analysis from trusted people.
Yeah.
I actually think, Bev, there's going to be a big political row over what's called a social tariff. Okay? A social tariff is a regularly cheaper rate of electricity and gas for people who are financially vulnerable. And it happens in many, many other countries. It doesn't happen now. Now, the point is, Bev, in April, this April, when that energy price cap goes up, unbelievably, given what's happened to wholesale energy prices, from £2,500 to £3,000 per household, the £400 discount that we all get is going to disappear. We don't know what's going to happen to it. So people are going to be in a worse position in April when that cap goes up. And I actually think there should be a social tariff. You know, I didn't notice this, I must admit, but earlier this year, 100 charities, including the Citizens Advice Bureau, which I mentioned, they wrote to Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, and they said that we desperately need a social tariff. Ofgem are now saying we desperately need a social tariff. After 2024, when all of the energy support package that the government has so far announced will apparently disappear.
Gosh. Well, you were talking about media that is not afraid to tackle the difficult subjects. I won an award, Liam Halligan.
I didn't notice.
Did you not notice?
Why don't you talk about it on social media and on your TV programme? Come on, Bev, don't hide your light under a bushel.
Well, I like to think this is
if
for
you
all
don't
of
pick
us.
yourself up, who's going to?
It's got a few dirty fingerprints on it. If you're coming back in the next hour, can you bring a cloth and just
All right, I'll do
polish
that.
my award for me?
Yeah, I'm very happy. I know that is my role in life.
I want to talk about you and your motorbike, but that's maybe for the next hour. Right, Liam Halligan.
Now, the next hour, I'm going to be talking about that new battery plant, the gigafactory in the northeast. I was up in the northeast at the end of last week.
Yeah.
Will it happen or won't it? I've got a film to be revealed exclusively here on Bev Turner.
Today. Right, sticking with business and our economy, from inflation and skyrocketing energy costs to the rise of online shopping during the pandemic, town centres and high streets have had their fair share of challenges. Our national reporter, Theo Chicomba, has been exploring what this might mean for the future of our high streets.
Retail has been the mainstay of UK high streets for most of the 20th century, but towns and cities are beginning to see more boarded up shops and falling footfall as shopping habits change. Businesses like this one are having to adapt.
I think the ease of being able to just buy things online, things like Amazon where you can get it delivered the next day, I think that's what kills the high streets. Because I think, well, I'm not off until Monday, so I'll have to wait until Monday and then I can pop down the high street and go and get something. Or I can get it from Amazon and it'll be here tomorrow. But I think people's shopping habits have changed, but then we can adapt to it. We've realised people's habits when it comes to having your hair done, people's habits have changed.
According to the Office for National Statistics, retail sales decreased in 2022 compared to 2021, largely reflecting declines in online, retailing and food stores as a result of the higher cost of living. But for businesses, what is needed to tackle the problem they have here?
In the past, we've had a bigger selection of businesses on the high street, different shops, clothes shops, laundrette, sweet shops, and it'd be nice to see some of that come back. I think with COVID, a lot of people are obviously working from home and were taken away from the shops, doing a lot more online, and it would be nice to see some new businesses come into the high street.
Sevenoaks District Council looks after towns like Edenbridge and more in this part of Kent. They say they did more than ever following the pandemic and launched a campaign to encourage visitors to return to high streets. They say more investment is on the way, £300,000 to launch projects and encourage more people to return to high streets.
While investment is welcome, is it enough for what's needed to boost the economy in towns like this?
We're just looking for what is available for the high streets. Like high streets, they're not dead, but they're certainly dying, and they need help. Edenbridge it's a brilliant community, and the high street is the high street. It's in the centre of what used to be a village. It's now becoming a town, so it's getting bigger and bigger, but the heart of it's getting smaller and smaller. So the bigger the heart, the bigger the happier the town.
Business leaders here say there is potential to see growth, but innovation and investment are the only way to revive the high streets and make them more resilient as consumer habits change. Theo Chicomba, GB News.
OK, Wendy's been getting in touch. She says, why on earth is the National Grid not asking people to voluntarily use less energy at peak times? All it takes is a text message and a bit of publicity, and I would be happy to change my usage. I think it's so true. And Pat says, between 5 and 6, most families are cooking their tea, bathing the little ones and doing homework. The only people who could possibly benefit are those who are at work, coming home later or staying in the pub. It's bonkers. We're talking about it now. Tessa Dunlop's here and Andrew Eborn. National Grid paying homeowners to switch off radiators. What do you think? Is this just a big scam? How can they possibly know? Well, it doesn't add up.
It's a two-tier system, not just the NHS, which we're going to be discussing in a minute, but also how you source your energy, because you can only benefit from this scheme if you have a smart meter. So I'm happy for my children to freeze and to smell and to eat cold food if it saves me a couple of quid. But actually, I don't have a smart meter, so we'll just go out tonight and be profligate with the heater.
But will it incentivise you to get one?
I mean,
That's
this is
point,
the first
isn't
time
it?
it's kicked in. It's our second cold snap. We're veering towards almost the end of winter, surely, and it's only a couple of quid that you're going to be saving. So I think for the effort, probably not. But my point is, it does feel a bit like, you know, some for them and night for you. So
you see, I got a smart meter ages ago.
Yes.
I thought, oh, that's good. I can see what I'm using, and on some days it is quite good. You're watching. You turn it. Now I've realised it's being used against me, and the potential to have it used against me is only increasing by the day. Andrew, what do you think?
I think that you're absolutely right, and you've always got to ask, why are they doing this? And I think it's actually to increase the people with smart meters turnaround. Here's an incentive for you. You switch off between the peak usage hours, 5 o'clock to 6. As you say, most people are probably still at work, so it's going to affect the other people anyway. Why are they doing this? And I think you look beneath the mischief, and the mischief basically is get more people to use smart meters. Here's an incentive. It's a bribe.
And then we can know what you're using.
Exactly.
We can know when you're using it. It's just creeping towards more of a surveillance state, and it will. Let's face it. The companies running these fuel companies will profit. They will somehow use this to their advantage. It will not be for our benefit.
Without a doubt, I think we always look at the bottom, don't we? Think, you know, benefits and the problem with the poor people. But actually, it's the big guys at the top who are always reaping the biggest rewards. But there is something quite scary about all of this. The National Grid have made it really clear, and we should stress this, the lights ain't going to go off tonight.
Yeah.
But 2 coal plants are being put on standby. This is not a step forward. We're in kind of dancing on thin ice, forgive the metaphor, and we're dependent on imports from Europe, and apparently France is short and we're short, and when we're feeling good, we give to France, and when France is, you know, they give to us, and as neither of us like each other at the moment, and there's a shortage of energy.
But it fits within the narrative, heating or eating, you turn around on that sort of basis. I say, that's the mischief. More people, and it'd be interesting to look at the statistics, which we're doing a few things, saying how many more people are going to buy one or get one installed as a result.
It's the creep towards the powerlessness of us as individuals, isn't it? Just give us the power that we need. Give it us at a competitive rate and stop complicating it by looking into my house and knowing what I'm doing.
But maybe it is complicated. Look at it, the same with commuting and travelling. You pay less if you travel off-peak. Is it such a terrible idea that actually, if you can manage to manoeuvre your lifestyle so that you can do your washing at midday, it might save you a penny? I don't find that as offensive as you two, Adam.
Well, I don't know. It sort of metastasises this psychology, this relationship that we've got with these organisations, doesn't it? And there will be houses tonight who are fighting between 5 and 6 o'clock.
No, absolutely.
There'll be family rows tonight at 5, 6 when the mum is saying to the kids, turn off your PlayStation. The kids don't want to turn off PlayStation. And then she'll go to her husband, don't put the kettle on. It's between 5 and 6.
Yeah.
This is how this kind of manifests itself in family homes. It causes conflict and division.
Breaking news, Bev. Every night I'm going, turn off the PlayStation. At least I've got an excuse, except I don't have a meter.
Yeah, but imagine, because, you know, there's going to be teenagers in the house who are going to go, I don't know what you're talking about, Mum. And there's going to be, you know, grumpy granddads going, I've paid for this all my life. I want to keep the heat.
We should get the stats.
That's how it happens. It causes division in families. Right, talking about division, Gordon Brown has written today warning the Tories about testing the water for a 2-tier healthcare system.
The fundamental point of the NHS, founded on the 5th of July 1948, is it should be free at source. Savid, he wrote a fantastic piece in the Times.
Sajid did.
He did, most of which I agreed with, because we are under a tremendous pressure. 10 million people didn't get the treatment they needed during lockdown and so on and so forth. The diseases have changed, the requirements have changed since the NHS was set up. It's all about cancer as opposed to polio and so on and so forth. The solution, however, is not to charge people to go and see their GP. He talks about the Swedish model and the Danish model, where you pay about 20 quid in equivalent. In Ireland, Ireland, you pay €75 if you go directly for a referral. It is a lot, but the idea, he says, is to disincentivise people from getting treatment. And that the problem is you're going to miss out those who need it.
So well, didn't it? In lockdowns, people didn't go and get their cancers looked at. And
So
look
they
where we
died
are now with
anyway.
our excess deaths.
I'll tell you what the solution is, and you're going to love this
You're
as well.
going to say robots.
I am. I'm going to tell you. No, because I'm going to say robots and AI. Look at what's happened in Milton Keynes, where fantastic. Milton Keynes is the shining example of people who've engaged with things. Robots and surgery, which is decreased time that you need to recover.
Right.
The efficiency is much, much better. And they're doing they just announced about they're doing gynae procedures and so on and so forth. Really, really complex.
Are you telling me I should have a gynae procedure
with a robotic?
Yes,
I am. And Milton Keynes will do that. And they've also got little bots going round delivering medicine.
I am not going to Milton Keynes to have a bot anywhere near my
metallic
gynae
exploratory hand.
I can't think of anything worse, can you? I can't think of... Are you honestly advocating?
But it's not about mechanical. It's all about... And doctors will tell you, it is the best thing ever. Embrace robotics, embrace AI.
And
I'm embracing robotics in stirrups.
Can you just give Andrew a reality pill?
Yes.
Because the only thing the big criticism I've got with this headline, Gordon Brown, remember him, warns of Tories testing the water for a two-tier healthcare. We already have a two-tier healthcare system. So many of my friends and people I love dearly and who really abhor the idea of paying for treatment have found themselves paying for treatment because otherwise they go around with a catheter or an ongoing infection for months.
So the way you reduce, and you can reduce the waiting time, if you can automate the escalation procedure. I've spoken to many, many medics about this.
Look at me, I'm opening my mind to you, Andrew Eborn, with your futurist intentions.
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm listening to you. Tell me how robots are going to save the NHS.
So a number of things. They will basically make procedures a lot more efficient, and they do say it's reducing the recovery. Now, Milton Keynes, we should get some people from Milton Keynes to talk about the practical steps that have been taken. Have a look at that.
Maybe we could do some
But also,
surgery live on air.
they can do it. Robots are the future. Also, artificial intelligence is the great way of basically streamlining processes. If it can reduce the escalation the times and work out the sensible way of dealing with it, that is the practical thing. The NHS is bust, but charging people is not the way to fix it. Embracing robotics and AI is.
Have we got no time to talk about...
over? No, I'm still trying to work out what you mean when you say AI can streamline these systems.
I'll give you an example. So artificial intelligence, for example, for mortgage applications, which sometimes will take about 30 days, they've now streamlined that. They can do that in 3 minutes. If you turn around and say, look, when a patient... I'm working with a number of doctors, a number of hospitals and so on and so forth, streamlining the process. For example, patient videos. What happens is your first time you go for a GP, they ask you all sorts of questions, you're not sure about the procedure and so on and so forth. A simple step, we're doing videos explaining the procedure so that patients feel more confident and deal with those sort of questions.
How do you ask your questions of a robot?
Yeah. And I've got to just keep it real. 50% of our need from the NHS comes when we're over 65, and actually they're not the most embracing of tech. Many are, but many aren't. And I think it can be very off-putting, and actually there's nothing like talking human to human. I love Bev so much more now I've met her in the flesh. Have we got time to talk about Boris Johnson's
I'm inspiring, just remember that.
I'm very
I'm an
inspired.
inspirational woman.
She gets younger.
She does.
I want to talk about Boris Johnson.
We are, but I think we're going to talk about it in the next section because we've been banging on too much. I'm still trying to work it out. No, I don't want it. If I'm going to have a medical procedure, I do not want it to explain to me by a video on YouTube. I want a doctor to sit down and explain it. And then if I have any questions, give me the dignity to ask those questions.
And you can get both. You can get both, and that's the idea. I'll take you through the process next time, and you will love it. I will change... I will change your...
And on that bombshell, right, that's the end of our first hour. We're going to be crossing over to Grenfell, actually, after the break, to talk about fire safety regulations that are coming into force today. We'll be right back with more after a short break.
I'm Camilla Tominey. Join me on GB News on Sunday mornings for a politics show with personality on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious, much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News, TV and radio. Thank you for finding us. So before midday, I'm going to be discussing the Fire Safety's new requirement for responsible persons of high-rise residential buildings to provide information to their local fire and rescue services. I'm going to also be joined by Toby Young to discuss free speech. What does it look like? What rights do we have now? And how does social media affect that? I'm going to be joined by my panellists back here, Tessa Dunlop and Andrew Eborn, for a look at some of today's top stories. That's all coming up after a look at your latest news.
Good morning, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 11. Well, in the last few minutes, the Prime Minister has asked his independent ethics advisor to investigate Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs. The former Chancellor has admitted he paid a penalty to HMRC following an error over shares in the polling company YouGov, which he co-founded. He hasn't disclosed the size of the settlement, which is believed to be almost £5 million. A source close to the minister says he won't quit as Tory party chair despite growing pressure over his tax affairs. While speaking this morning, Rishi Sunak said there are clearly questions to answer. Thousands of ambulance workers are striking for the third time in 5 weeks. Unison and GMB union members across England and Wales have walked out, along with staff at 2 hospital trusts in Liverpool. Further industrial action is planned in the coming weeks by nurses and other NHS workers. Union leaders are calling for fair pay, accusing the government of not wanting to find a resolution. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the action is hugely disappointing and warned patients of disruption. A 72-year-old man suspected of carrying out a mass shooting in California has been found dead by police. 10 people believed to be in their 50s and 60s were killed celebrating the Chinese Lunar New Year in Monterey Park near Los Angeles at the weekend. 10 others were injured. Detectives say the suspect, Hu Can Tran, took his own life around 12 hours after the attack. Members of the public who intervened were praised by the county sheriff.
The weapon that was recovered from the Alhambra location, in which, remember, the suspect went to the Alhambra location after he conducted the shooting, and he was disarmed by 2 community members who I consider to be heroes because they saved lives.
Households with smart meters could receive discounts if they cut their energy use during peak times today. After successful trials, National Grid is launching its demand flexibility scheme between 5 and 6 p.m. 26 suppliers are signed up to the initiative. It's also ordered 3 coal plants to begin warming up as a contingency, with forecasters predicting supplies could be squeezed during today's cold snap. Meanwhile, the energy regulator is launching a review of the checks and balance companies use to place customers on prepayment meters. Ofgem is threatening legal action if they don't take due care in the process. The chief executive says the number of people forced onto prepayment meters is extremely high and vulnerable customers shouldn't be left in the dark and cold during winter. Experts are warning the recession expected to hit the UK could be twice as bad as previously thought. Economists at consultancy firm EY say the outlook has become gloomier, with the country facing less government support and higher taxes. Despite cutting deeper than first forecast, the firm doesn't expect it will last longer than originally predicted. Boris Johnson has made a surprise visit to Ukraine. The former Prime Minister, who met President Zelensky in the capital Kyiv, said Britain would stick by the country for as long as it takes. The pair also walked the streets of war-torn Bucha, where hundreds of people were killed during Russian attacks. A charity is calling on the government to eliminate cervical cancer, as screening for the disease is at its lowest level for 2 decades. Joe's Cervical Cancer Trust wants home testing kits to be offered in a bid to reduce the number of no-shows for screenings. Nearly all cervical cancers are caused by the HPV virus. In England, the number of girls getting the HPV vaccine in schools has dropped 20% lower than before the pandemic. More than 800 women die from cervical cancer each year in the UK. 4 red squirrels have been successfully introduced to the Castleward estate in County Down as part of efforts to help the threatened mammal make a return. The spread of the invasive grey squirrel has caused a steep decline in the population of native reds in the UK. Ulster Wildlife hopes the estate will provide the perfect woodland habitat for the squirrels to flourish. This is GB News. More from me in half an hour. Now, though, it's back to Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News TV and DAB Radio. Here what we've got this morning. What has been learned since the Grenfell fire? Well, new safety regulations have been issued which state that those responsible for multi-occupied residential properties must provide information on their buildings to the local fire and rescue service. But will that make a difference? We will find out. And after I won an award for being inspirational, did I mention that? We're talking about the importance of healthy, honest debate and freedom of speech. I'm going to be joined by the director of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young, to discuss whether saying what you think is becoming increasingly more difficult. And of course, a big news story today, we've been discussing it already, involves you being asked to sign up to the smart meter system, which could earn you rewards for turning off your heating. Don't forget to vote in our Twitter poll. I'm asking you, as households are being asked with smart meters to receive discounts if they cut their energy between 5 and 6 today, will you turn the heating off this evening? Would you be keen to sign up to that system? Email me gbviews@gbnews or tweet me at gbnews to have your say. Stephen said, I believe it is wrong that the National Grid should be allowed to have a demand flexibility service that discriminates against people who don't have or want a smart meter. We all pay our electricity bills, and just because most people want them, they have to suffer. Don't want them, sorry. Keep those messages coming, won't you? Now, from today, those responsible for multi-occupant residential buildings must provide information on those properties to their local fire and rescue service. The regulations are the next stage of new fire safety legislation, which has been introduced as a result of the Grenfell Tower inquiry. So GB News South East of England reporter Ray Addison has more on this. Good morning, Ray. What more do we know about these regulations? I know there's been a lot of frustration from people who were affected by the Grenfell fire that not enough change has happened sufficiently quickly.
Yeah, good morning, Bev. Well, it was just before 1 a.m. on the 14th of June 2017 that a fire started in a kitchen in a flat on the 4th floor of Grenfell Tower behind me. Now, within minutes, it had spread to the outside of the building and then raced up the side of the 23 stories and then spreading to all 4 sides of Grenfell Tower. 72 people died that morning as a result of the blaze. Now, as you said, this new regulations come into effect today, meaning that one person is responsible for each building. That's usually the building's owner, and they have to give information to the local fire and rescue service on the type and construction of the walls and the floors. And the idea of that is that they then have a better chance of preparing a plan if events such as Grenfell were to happen again. Now, Emma O'Connor is a survivor. She was a resident of Grenfell. She joins me now. Emma, thank you very much for joining me. What's your take on these new regulations?
Simply not enough, and another tick boxing exercise. The regulations are categorised with the 18-metre rule, which totally should be abolished. Everyone's lives matter. You can't categorise people's lives. This cladding is still on hospitals and schools and hotels. Why does disabled people's lives matter not more than anyone else's? Even though the percentage of disabled people were quite high for sadly passing away in the fire, it was more able-bodied people that were actually stuck and had to have help from the fire service.
So you'd like to see greater regulations which impact and protect people who have disabilities. Earlier on, we were talking to Justice for Grenfell, and they were saying that at the current rate of these regulations being introduced, it will take till 2064, 65 for all these safety measures to be in place. What's your view? We're 5 years after Grenfell.
It's far too slow, and shouldn't be happening so slowly. They can get things in quicker that they believe they care about, but not fire safety.
So each building will now have a responsible person, and if they do not follow the regulations, it's a possibility of an unlimited fine or up to 2 years in prison. Is that enough?
Definitely not. Unlimited fines do nothing for the people that it truly affects. Sorry, what was the other one?
Just saying, regarding the penalties, do you think that they've gone far enough?
Penalties, absolutely not. It's an unlimited fine for what? There's no one who will take responsibility for these corporate people.
Emma, thank you very much. We're going to have to end it there. Just to let you know, we did reach out to London Fire Brigade, and they said this is just the beginning in terms of improving fire safety of residential buildings. They're calling for a culture change in the industry.
Thank you, Ray. Ray Addison there down at Grenfell in West London. Well, joining me now is Liam Spender, the spokesman for End Our Cladding Scandal. Good morning, Liam. What do you make of these new regulations? Do they go far enough?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's I think the issue with the regulations, obviously I'd echo everything the Grenfell survivor just told you, but the issue is enforcement. There's no extra money to fire and rescue services or to the health and safety executive to enforce these new regulations, and unless they're enforced properly, they won't make a jot of difference.
How are the people now from Grenfell, the people whose lives were affected by it, Liam? Do they feel like they've had any sense of justice yet?
I think it's been a long road and we're yet to reach the conclusion. But I mean, this year it's 6 years and there's still no sign of any real accountability for the people who were involved. I can understand their frustration.
OK. All right. Well, thank you so much. We're seeing pictures here of the commemorations which the people of Grenfell have to go through every year. Forever in Our Hearts says the huge sign that still hangs over the building. Do we have any idea, Liam, what the fullness of time, what will happen to the actual tower, to Grenfell Tower? Presumably it's still needed for the investigations, is it, even to this day?
I think that's part of the reason it's been preserved. As I understand it, the Ministry of Housing has set up a group and taken responsibility for the building, and they're supposed to be consulting with the Grenfell community on the way forward. But I think there's definitely a plan for some sort of memorial, but I don't think anything's fixed yet.
As of yet. OK, thank you very much indeed for discussing that with us. Now, Liam Spender there. Now, the Prime Minister is making a speech from a hospital. Let's take a listen. No, apparently he's not. We've got a Twitter poll going on today. We're asking you, as households with smart meters could receive discounts if they cut their energy cut their energy use between 5 and 6 o'clock today. Will you turn off the heating this evening? Cast your vote now. GBviews at GBnews.uk or tweet me at GBnews. I think there is a possibility that Rishi Sunak might be talking, but I will let you know as and when that happens. Thank you so much for all of your views this morning. Gary has said, I won't be turning my power off. Bev, it's just another controlling test of the nation. All they have to do is flower it up by saying it's for the planet, etc. If this works, then what's next? Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we have to be really vigilant to these sorts of social changes without having, again, it seems a huge amount of discussion about it, does it? And Susie has said, I want to help the country to conserve electricity. It is the least we can do to help. Yes, but then we should probably, and I think the vast majority of people would do that anyway without being somehow blackmailed via a smart meter. Right, after the break, my panellists Tessa Dunlop and Andrew Eborn will be here to debate some of the day's top stories. First, though, time for a quick break.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A bit of a north-south split with the weather at the moment. Scotland and Northern Ireland fairly cloudy, but milder air has arrived here. Still very cold across England and Wales, but many areas sunny thanks to this area of high pressure. Around the top of it, though, low pressure systems, weather fronts just dancing across Scotland and Northern Ireland, bringing cloud, but not too much in the way of rain. Damp and drizzly in southwest Scotland, parts of the far northwest of England too, and some rain across the far north, but otherwise, as I said, dry. We've seen some thick fog through this morning over parts of southeast England. That'll only slowly clear. Some places may keep it all day. And quite cloudy conditions just brushing into the east of East Anglia and across the far southeast. It's cold in the south, 5-6 degrees if the fog sticks, barely getting above freezing, but double figures across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where the cloud persists and will keep a bit more drizzly rain across the far northwest overnight. Elsewhere further south, again, likely to see some thick fog patches in this zone from northeast England down to southwest Wales, southwest England to East Anglia. That's also the zone where it'll be coldest and frosty. A bit more cloud in the southeast means it won't be quite as cold perhaps here as last night. And another fairly mild one across Scotland and Northern Ireland, where again, tomorrow's mostly cloudy with patchy rain, but northeast Scotland may well see some brightness. Sunny spells developing for a good chunk of England and Wales, quite cloudy in the far southeast. Again, some stubborn fog patches both in the morning and perhaps lingering all day, keeping the temperatures at freezing. Even where it's sunny in the south, only 4 or 5 degrees, whereas further north, double figures, perhaps even milder than today, 11, perhaps even 12 Celsius. We'll keep that contrast going through Tuesday evening as well. There's a weather front just across the far north pushing in as we go into Wednesday. That will mix things up a little bit, bringing some patchy rain south into parts of northern England in particular during Wednesday, and slowly switching the temperature, so turning a little milder in the south, meanwhile turning colder further north.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Very good morning. It's 11:20. This is Bev Turner today on GB News TV and DAB Radio. My panel are still here. I'm delighted to be joined by author and historian Dr. Tessa Dunlop and broadcaster and futurist Andrew Eborn. Right, Tessa, are we talking about Prince Andrew or Boris Johnson? Which would you like to talk about first?
Oh, the two heavyweights of my life. I think we're going to go Prince Andrew, then Boris Johnson. The question of Prince Andrew, many of us may have felt, that's been dealt with. You know, and I'm not suggesting for one moment that he's got away with it, but at least it fell off from the headlines. Someone like me, I'm a monarchist. I like the idea of constitutional monarchy. I totally understood what had to be dealt with because it was a drip, drip, drip into our public narrative, wasn't it?
Just to remember,
outstanding case.
For those who don't know what we're dealing with, Virginia Giuffre, who made accusations against him of inappropriate sexual activity when she was under... I want to say under 16, but it was in America. I think she was
17.
Thank you. She was under 18. 17.
And
17.
He settled out of court. We don't know for how many millions, but one of the premises of the settlement was he did not assume any guilt.
Yeah.
And this is what he has clearly been chafing over ever since. And he felt he was jumped into the accord because, of course, it was his mother's jubilee, and then the funeral meant there's been no space for this conversation. Of course, it's been triggered because tonight, Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted felon currently in prison in America for facilitating possibly the most notorious paedophile of all times, or one of them at least, is speaking out live on television, claiming she has no memory of that photo. Now, surely everyone knows that photo, the one of him...
Prince Andrew held with his arm
Prince Andrew, what he's saying, yes.
But isn't the new twist on this is that Prince Andrew has just inherited a load of money...
Exactly.
...with the Queen's passing, and now he feels emboldened, Andrew, to take this back to court to clear his name. How extraordinary.
Well, it's an extraordinary... There are two things on this. He is saying that he was basically forced into shutting it up so it didn't spoil the Jubilee celebrations. Which is a narrative that some may believe.
He paid 13 million...
12 million, and he had to sell his little Swiss chalet, which he had with Fergie, all that sort of stuff.
The hardship
stuff. And they had the wonderful Andrew, the musical, on Channel 4 over December, which is very good, with the best advertising campaign ever, because they went to the Woking Pizza Express and said, if you miss it, you better have a decent alibi, which I love. They put little billboard. What he's basically saying, he's saying the photo is fake. Now, we all know, in this wonderful world of AI and artificial intelligence and that you can fake photos. Ghislaine Maxwell is saying that recollections may vary. I never saw this woman.
To be clear, she's saying she has no memory.
Yes.
And this is therefore reinforcing Andrew's point.
Yes.
So it's about emboldening his case. But she's in prison. So this has been triggered. Yes, you're right, because suddenly his pockets are somewhat deeper. And generally, when you slug it out in the courts, those with the deepest pockets tend to win. But also, she is now being given this international voice, which I feel angry about.
This is what I don't understand, right? Yes. I don't understand this. If he felt that he had no case to answer, why pay the money in the first place? And therefore, if he... Do you know what I mean? If his conscience was clear, he wouldn't have paid that money in the first place. So what could possibly change between
I agree 100%.
then and now?
And his lawyers, according to this report, are saying, look, don't do it, leave it alone. He is turning around and saying that he was basically forced into getting a settlement. And the narrative would be he was forced into getting a settlement so you don't spoil the Jubilee celebrations.
But surely you're forced into getting a settlement if you've done something that you might want to kind of not have to...
remember, he never...
He never admitted anything. It's without prejudice to that sort of
what this points to, once again, is his entitlement. He still is a man in shock that something, mud has been thrown in some of it. It's like he can't kind of believe he's lost his HRA.
Well,
that's what happens if you're born with a
talking of spoiled man-child babies, Boris Johnson... Sorry, I know a lot of you like him.
Boris Bank chum. We always love sort of headlines and things like that, don't they?
Look at this, BBC, Boris Bank chum. This is absolutely genius headline there, isn't it? Right, what's he done, Tessa, and do we think he's guilty of anything inappropriate?
One of his big Tory donors, Richard Sharp, who unfortunately, quite quickly after this, basically facilitation of an £800,000 loan, became the chairman of the BBC. And now it's unravelling because this was a kind of question of favours and therefore appointments. Just so many things stand out in this case. First of all, £800,000. He was living in a government-funded flat. What did he need £800,000 for? I did ask this on Twitter. I thought the best response was to pay for his gazillion children because he's not entitled to child benefit. But of course, the bigger point is, you know, there's a seemingly neutral organisation. Impartiality is the buzzword of the BBC. The chairperson of that organisation not only is a Tory donor, by the way, that's standard fare. Under Tony Blair, the chairman was a Labour donor, but that actually, there was an introduction with a guy called Blythe, a Canadian. Boris Johnson's related to him, and somehow they helped him.
He's a distant cousin. He's a distant cousin of Boris Johnson, and basically he gave the loan guarantee. But it does raise questions about impartiality and so on and so forth, which he would need to answer. I mean, and I think you're looking at that sort of principle. I mean, chairman of the BBC, Marmaduke Hussey, Lady Hussey's, all in the news. She was one of, he was a previous chairman, and very good one indeed. And I met Richard. He's a lovely guy, and I think we have to make sure that we get away from just the sensational headlines. Was his appointment as a result of this, or is it just really a question to be answered?
And therefore, I guess the point is who is in the wrong?
Yes.
Because, you know, the headline is that it's Boris Johnson who's acted out with perhaps some sort of... He's tapped him up for this guarantee of the loan.
Yeah.
Maybe Boris Johnson is in the wrong for doing that. I can't help but think, if it's a friend of a friend of a friend, maybe it's a small world, they've helped each other out. I'm not sure it's that bad.
The helping of the loan isn't the problem. It's that very shortly afterwards, he's then appointed, it's a government appointment to this key impartial role as chairperson of the BBC. But just quickly on the whole Johnson narrative, you see him out there in Ukraine, and of course the timing of that photograph,
of course,
Zelensky is not coincidental, but it's such a missed opportunity at the moment with Germany foot-dragging, mealy-mouthed over their Leopard tanks, not even letting Poland give their tanks to Ukraine. We should be leading on this. We were so strong on it, and actually, because of all the sort of quagmire of sleaze around our government, it's a tragedy.
I can't think the worst thing that Boris Johnson has done, it was all the papers this week, is him writing his name on the bomb that was being sent. Did you see that?
That was
a really awful image of him in Kyiv, signing his name on a bomb designed for Russia. It's like, who advised you to do that? Do you not see how inflammatory and provocative a statement that is?
Well, it's like Prince Harry talking about the Taliban thing. You don't want to be associated with the death and destruction on that sort of basis.
All of this moves away from actually Britain's clear-sighted and generous backing. They were late to the
Very
picnic.
generous backing.
We have been hosting Russian oligarchs for far too long, but we made a clear cut from that, and it's a shame that we don't have good leaders to follow through at the moment.
Arguably too generous backing. Anyway, listen, COVID restrictions are still in operation in 2/3 of hospitals. What? Restricting patients from seeing their loved ones. Over 2/3 of NHS trusts are still using outdated COVID restrictions.
Well, the key word in that is outdated, because if it's no longer effective, then you shouldn't be having it. And all sorts of questions regarding the effectiveness, and you've been very publicly about your views and things like that. Yeah, but you have to question the logic. So why is this happening? And if it's not necessary, then it shouldn't be in place. What needs to happen, like most of these things, the key is about communication. Explain why it's effective, why it's necessary, and then ask those questions. We have to question everything.
What do you think, Tessa? I mean, it's even things like some hospitals are still... the Care Quality Commission revealed over half of pregnant women were denied the support of their partner while giving birth last year.
Yeah, I think...
I have no words.
It's particularly, it feels quite punitive, doesn't it, entering any kind of public healthcare space at the moment. I've noticed that Steve Barclay's, I mean, he's kind of scared of his own department, because half of them are striking. They're striking today, the ambulance workers. And I think this is OK, you can make your own decision about COVID rules then. It's almost like, here's a little crumb, because I'm not going to give you the pay you want, but you can get... And I think the problem is that healthcare workers are so pushed from nurses and auxiliaries upwards that probably is a bit inconvenient having, you know, new dad wandering around and getting lost. Well, so it's easier, actually, to minimise the interaction with Joe Public. And, of course, it's scientifically obvious, isn't it, that actually the more people you have milling around, the more germs you have milling around.
Yeah, but then you have us. That's how we lived our life before COVID. There's no reason why we should change that.
Indeed, but the difference is now... and partly because of COVID, we've got an NHS at tipping point.
Right.
And
because of COVID regulations, we've got an NHS.
And they were told last March to open up.
The operations were postponed, and there's this massive backlog, and so they don't want to take any risk ever. But you have that human thing. You know, if you're Auntie Mabel in hospital and I come and see you and you can't hear me because I'm wearing a mask, it's much harder.
Yeah.
But why are we... Do you know what never happened, Andrew? We never had the actual bell to say COVID's over.
Well, in March they gave the call saying... I know you're right, and we won't.
It is in terms of how we live our lives. It has to be. Well, it's not now when.
We now have to live with it, is the narrative, isn't it?
2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Yeah.
At what point, at what metric was Boris Johnson going to say, right, it's done now, we're over? We still never had that
But some people, but back in March, they said you could lift these restrictions, and this is the point. So 70% of hospitals are not lifting it, in spite of being told in March that it was. Which is why I say you have to ask, why are they in place? Because if it's causing more damage as a result of people not being able to see loved ones and so on and so forth, it's got to be wrong. If you need it to prevent it, then it could be interesting.
The most acute crisis, the most acute cases of those with coronavirus are in hospitals.
Yes.
Correct.
So they have a very different narrative and see it very different from us.
Absolutely. No, I do understand that. But we always had infections that were going to be risky to people in hospitals. Coronavirus that came along was worse. I accept that, spring 2020. But what we're dealing with now is no different to what we had before spring 2020.
But I think the key difference is, A, we have another endemic problem with COVID as well as flu, and you have an NHS that ain't managing its numbers. So any kind of risk they fear is going to tip them over. And that's the landscape difference. I think... I'm not excusing it.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting, but I think that logic is flawed, because I think the risk... You know, if you have a pregnant woman going in to give birth, and she's told you can't have your partner with you in your... at your birth because of COVID.
Yeah.
I agree, that's humane. It's inhumane.
It's inhumane.
And it is inhumane. And you're absolutely right. And if the restrictions cause more damage than good, that's got to be wrong. So it's good to call it out. We need the hard facts and evidence. People should look at that, which is why I say question everything. Why are they still in place? It's not reassuring people it's causing more damage than good.
But at the moment, with the strikes unravelling, the government isn't in full control, which is why they've left this. Yeah, and so they've left this as a decision for healthcare workers.
Yes.
So we're going to get science capping humanity, if you like.
And do you know what, as well, it brings back to what I was saying earlier about the arguments that they'll have at dinner tables between 5 and 6 tonight. This will be arguments in wards, in maternity wards, and in all sorts of hospitals, because you will have some midwives saying you can't come in because of COVID. You'll have other midwives saying this isn't fair, it's inhumane, it's not compassionate. And there's your conflict and there's your division. And we just have to have somebody at the top. Where are the grown-ups in the room making these decisions so that people aren't fighting amongst themselves? Anyway, after the break, take a deep breath. Do we need more freedom to question, challenge and debate the status quo? Yes, we do. I'm going to be joined by Director of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young, after your morning news.
Good morning, it's 11:32. Here are the headlines from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has asked his independent ethics advisor to investigate the Tory party chair's tax affairs, saying clearly there are questions that need answering. Nadeem Zahawi has welcomed the investigation, saying he's confident he acted properly throughout. The former Chancellor has admitted he paid a penalty to HMRC following an error over shares in the polling company YouGov, which he co-founded. He hasn't disclosed the size of the settlement, which is believed to be almost £5 million. Thousands of ambulance workers are striking for the third time in 5 weeks. Unison and GMB union members across England and Wales have walked out, along with staff at 2 hospital trusts in Liverpool. Further industrial action is planned in the coming weeks by nurses and other NHS workers. Union leaders are calling for fair pay, accusing the government of not wanting to find a resolution. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the action is hugely disappointing and warned patients of disruption. A 72-year-old man suspected of carrying out a mass shooting in California has been found dead by police. 10 people believed to be in their 50s and 60s were killed while celebrating the Chinese Lunar New Year in Monterey Park near Los Angeles at the weekend. 10 others were injured. Detectives say the suspect, Hu Can Tran, took his own life around 12 hours after the attack. Households with smart meters could receive discounts if they cut their energy use during peak times today. After successful trials, National Grid is launching its demand flexibility scheme between 5 and 6 o'clock. 26 suppliers are signed up to the initiative. It's also ordered 3 coal plants to begin warming up as a contingency, with forecasters predicting supplies could be squeezed during today's cold snap. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Now, I insisted that we didn't do this next item. But over the weekend, the Inspiration Awards for Women took place at the Landmark Hotel. And thanks to you, I won this. Thank you very much to all the viewers and listeners and everyone who follows me on social media. I was shortlisted and I won the award for Aspirational Public Figure, which I think is over-egging it a little bit. But anyway, I'm dedicating this award to everyone who has followed me on this journey in providing balance and truth and asking the questions that needed to be asked, especially since spring of 2020, and most importantly, in the area of freedom of speech. Well, joining me now is the General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Good morning, Toby. Now, I was more surprised than anybody. I was more surprised than anybody to be given an award, especially with a public vote. And I think it shows that there is a real tide swell. There is a swell of feeling from people who are frustrated, perhaps, by the lack of open and honest debate and conversation that they feel that they have been allowed to have since spring 2020. Is that how you might see it?
Yes, I think there is a real public appetite to hear controversial, politically contentious issues, particularly if they affect all of our lives, discussed in a more open way in the mainstream media. And I'm sure that this much deserved award, Beverly, you're being far too modest. Of course, we should be talking about it and congratulating you about it. I'm sure that it was due to the fact that there is this huge public appetite to hear more responsible, articulate journalists like you raise questions about some of these big policy issues that is becoming increasingly hard to debate in the public square.
Why has it been so hard since spring 2020 to have these debates, Toby? And I know that is a big question and it is multifaceted influences, but how does it seem to you? How would you sum it up?
Well, I think the fundamental reason that journalists and editors in the mainstream media were unwilling to really give a platform to voices challenging the wisdom of the lockdown policy and are now equally unwilling, though we see a little bit more flexibility, but unwilling to give a platform to people raising questions about the safety and efficacy of the mRNA COVID vaccines. I don't think it's the result of a conspiracy. I don't think that the mainstream media is being controlled by Big Pharma or by the WEF or anything like that. I think it's just groupthink. I think most journalists and editors, senior professionals, share the consensus view of politicians, of senior officials, of public health panjandrums, that these policies are in the best interests of the public. And if you allow too many people to raise questions about them, that will encourage, in the case of the lockdown, encourage members of the public not to observe the COVID restrictions, and in the case of the vaccines, discourage people from getting vaccinated and boosted. So I think they do genuinely believe that suppressing dissent on those particular issues is for the public benefit, and that's how they rationalize it, I think. I mean, I think that's a mistake. And in the case of the lockdown policy, I think, there's now much more discussion than there was years ago about the wisdom of that policy. And I think, many senior scientists are coming to the conclusion that actually the lockdowns probably do more harm than good. And I think on the issue of Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I agree. And I think for those of us who were shouting about the fact that we were going to have huge inflation, we were going to have mental health issues with teenagers, we were going to have education attainment slashed for some particularly poor youngsters, we were going to have an NHS that would never survive and come back from COVID. These are the things that you were shouting about, Toby, as well. I know that. And I think a lot of people appreciate the fact that you were trying to cut through as well. Let me just talk more broadly about free speech and about this idea of policing our language. We saw Jeremy Clarkson take a huge sort of amount of abuse from the public when he wrote his piece about Meghan Markle and took a fictional scene, and people took it very literally. Did you see his piece in a newspaper that he wrote yesterday, where he raised the question, who is behind so much verbal hygiene, maybe that's the phrase we should use, that we are being encouraged to use at the moment? Who do you think?
Yeah, it was a very good piece, and it was great to see Jeremy Clarkson fighting back. The Free Speech Union started a petition on Friday, Beverly, directed at the chief executive of ITV, urging her not to sack Jeremy Clarkson as the host of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And that's now got over 35,000 signatures. I think if we can get it up to 50,000, it's going to be hard to ignore. And if any viewers want to sign that petition, if they think Jeremy Clarkson has paid a heavy price for remarks which were admittedly in poor taste, but which he's apologised for 3 times now, if they don't want to see Jeremy Clarkson cancelled and kicked out of our public life, then please do go to change.org, search for Don't Cancel Jeremy Clarkson and sign the petition. I thought it was an excellent piece, and he did raise some very good questions. Why is it that the same ideological cult seems to have captured so many different parts of our society, from sport, TV drama, the NHS, the civil service? And it is extraordinary. It is as though we've witnessed a kind of silent coup which, without a shot,
and in fact, that was the phrase he used, wasn't it? I hate to silence you, Toby Young, especially when you're here to talk about free speech, but we've run out of time. Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, Tory politicians have talked about this gigafactory that was due to be built in the northeast. At the end of last week, the company behind the new plant went bust. Where does it leave the project? What does it represent? Our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, is just back from the northeast. What's going on up there?
British Volt was a start-up company that was raising money to build this £3.6 billion gigafactory, making the batteries that go into electric vans and cars. This gigafactory, which would be only the second in the UK, was meant to secure the future of car making in the northeast, because you need to make the cars near to where the batteries are built, because they're very, very heavy and uneconomic to transport. We heard this news at the end of last week, so I immediately got on a train. We're making phone calls on the way up to Newcastle. We've got lots and lots of interviews. I've put them together in a film. So this is me in the northeast examining whether or not that crucial gigafactory at the heart of the so-called new industrial green revolution is actually going to happen.
This scrappy piece of land in Camas, just north of Newcastle, is the proposed site of Britain's second gigafactory. £3.6 billion plant, making the batteries that will secure the future of car making in the northeast. Already linked to the national grid, this former power station site is perfect for a battery factory, but not for now, because British Volt, the company building the plant, has gone bust.
It's really, really disappointing for the northeast and for the UK to see British Volt where we are. What we'd like to see is the government step up to see if they can support either British Volt or somebody else coming in to take over the site, which is the #1 site in the UK to produce batteries.
Camas is next to the deep water port of Blythe, which is also hooked up to countless offshore turbines which could power a new gigafactory. The northeast is meant to be the heart of Britain's new green industrial revolution, with attention now focused on Camas, a site of huge potential.
It's history put in infrastructure that is absolutely required for a site to be a battery plant. The power coming in from the North Sea Collector link, the power station supply to the national grid, the deep sea port here in Blythe, all are key, and the transport links are key to manufacturing batteries and getting them away safely.
But British Volt couldn't sell its vision to enough private sector backers. So £100 million of government money, conditional on private investment, also remains out of reach. Down the coast in Sunderland, US energy company Turntide, making smaller batteries for industrial use, has invested heavily. The company says new investors will emerge to build the gigafactory at Camas.
Turntide overall looked to pivot into the transport electrification space. It looked to the northeast because it understood there was production capability, there was engineering capability, and there was just the talent and the depth of workforce to make that happen.
So it seems strange this British Volt factory isn't going to happen.
Like I say, it may happen. We're hoping that someone is going to go in and be able to do something with it. But if it does go down and jobs are lost, from a long-term standpoint, we think the jobs will be picked up elsewhere. We're hiring, for example, and we continue to grow and evolve our business.
Back in Camas, locals say the gigafactory is just another broken promise. Pub owner John Charlton, son of the 1966 England World Cup hero Jackie, doesn't believe Rishi Sunak's promises of commitment to the region.
Do you trust Labour more to get this gigafactory built?
No, I wouldn't trust either of them, to be honest with you. I mean, what they do is they fight each other, and then it's just they're not worried about the people that live here. They're worried about their own particular parties and their own particular policies, and it's about the people that live in the North East, and they're not being considered at all.
Local dog walker Tracy is also sceptical of Rishi Sunak's claims.
They don't back the North East enough. They say they do, but when it comes down to it, they don't. They don't get us wrong, they have done a lot of things right for other people, but I wouldn't say up here, no. A lot of people's against the Tories up here.
The UK needs an estimated 10 battery-making gigafactories by 2030, when sales of new petrol and diesel vehicles are due to be outlawed. Britishvolt's plant would have been only the second. But well-informed locals say the strength of the chemist site and the local workforce means this factory will be built.
Yes, I am hopeful and I'm certain that there will be a plant at the chemist site because of the infrastructure. It is the best site in the country for a battery plant, bar none.
Britishvolt's failure exposes the Tories to claims levelling up is just a slogan. And voters here in the North East and across the Red Wall will determine the next general election. Liam Halligan, GB News.
Right, I'm whittering away with my panel here. Thank you, Liam Halligan, for that. Andrew Eborn is back with me, and also Dr. Tessa Dunlop. Now, we are looking at... We're all very aware of the effects that the last few years have had on the education of our youngsters. But there's a new story that's just broken this morning, actually, while we've been on air, about the fall in first-class degrees after a crackdown on pandemic-grade inflation. What does that mean? What's happened,
interestingly,
Tessa?
this marks the first time there's been a fall in the award of degrees since the organisation that monitored it was founded in 1993. So it's not just during COVID times that we've seen grade inflation. There's a lot of factors that come into play. I know a bit about this because to do my PhD, to get your funding, you'd also do a bit of lecturing.
Yeah.
And it's such a different relationship now between student and lecturer, because previously in our day, Bev, we are so old that we have to do hands up. We got our education for free. I even got government grant to help me drink. I got free money from the government. Obviously, it was meant to be for accommodation and clothes.
You're one of these sponges on the front of today's Daily Mail. I take more from the state.
But nowadays, of course, kids are paying. They might not be paying up front. They're building massive debt. 9 grand just for tuition fees alone. So they want bang for their buck. There's an expectation that they're not just going to be receiving a really high quality education, but that they're also going to get something worth having at the end of it.
Absolutely.
But does it explain why the grades have
Well,
gone
not
down?
really. And lies, damn lies and statistics. My view is really clear. There used to be percentages. You used to say X percent would get first class.
Yes.
That sort of percentage would get upper seconds and so on and so forth. My view is that if everybody is of a certain standard, then everybody should be able to be afforded a first-class degree.
Yes.
And I think that would be the logical thing. Also, if you look deeper into the article, they say that the percentage is still higher than it was before the pandemic. What they're saying is that in 2021 to 2022, 32% of undergraduate degrees were awarded a first-class honour, a fall of 4% from 36% the year before. So you've got to ask, well, why is that happening? Is it because the standard is getting lower, or have the boundaries moved? And the trouble with these sort of things, they're the headline things, as opposed to getting into the details as to why that is happening.
Do we know why?
There is a boundary shift. Also, there's been a greater emphasis, for example, on coursework, which you can control more, and you're more likely to get your predicted grade. In our day, I remember I went to Oxford. My entire 3-year degree was judged on how I performed in 8 3-hour exams in 1 week. If I'd had flu, my period, can you imagine? Anything could have thrown me off. Actually, ironically, I feel great pity for those caught in the COVID pandemic, because it was such a great training. I mean, live TV, no problem, once you've done 3 8-hour exams, 8 3-hour exams.
It's a joy, especially this show. We love it. It's going to be brilliant. It's fantastic. Award-winning
I'm going to
people.
with a robot one day.
It's already happened.
And I know it makes me unpopular with your viewers, but just one of the other key things to pull from this report report, the number of EU entrants coming to our universities fell by 53%. Every student not educated in Britain, that is such a loss of soft power in Europe going into the future. I'm sorry.
But then some people would say, but that's fine because what we want is British-born students to take those places.
No, those places are being taken by global citizens, predominantly people coming in from India.
And everything's 53% today, isn't it? 53% of all income tax and so on and so forth. We touched on earlier in the show. But you have to ask why. And it's no good just having the headlines unless you explain what's actually happening. Because if you explain what's happening, we then try and find the solution.
Yeah. Right, this is a story I really wanted us to do. It's a lovely little story in The Guardian today. This is a gentleman called Mark Frith. He was a BAFTA-winning documentary maker. And he got to 60. His family bought his mother's house off him. So he moved back to his family home that he'd grown up in and started to draw and has made it his life's work and his life's passion. He's now making a living out of it. And it just made me think, what should we be revisiting from our childhood,
wonderful
Andrew?
stuff. I'll tell you exactly what. I'll tell you lots of things. And music is one of the most powerful things. Best video, if you haven't seen it, there's a ballerina called Marta Gonzalez, who was a principal ballerina, used to do Swan Lake, and she was lost in a different world through Alzheimer's. What happened? They put some headphones on, and it makes you sort of quite tearful. I know, but if you haven't, do look at it. They played the main thing from Swan Lake, Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, and she just came alive. She started doing the gestures and things like that. It brought tears to my... She can remember the movements and everything.
Yeah.
Your childhood memories are all in there. Yeah. The way that we can help people through this sort of stuff is brilliant. So go back to the early things that you used to do as a child. It is superb.
You know what I want to do sometimes? Just stand against a brick wall and throw a tennis ball back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Absolutely. It's interesting because my day job is predominantly writing about very old people, their experiences, for instance, the last women who served in World War II, etc. And there is something joy-filled about watching these women go back in time. But also because human nature, we love to talk about ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes. And so few people actually ask these treasure troves of information about themselves. But I think... On a more prosaic level, I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland and I desperately miss it, but I don't live up there anymore. But I do find if I can work out a way of just transporting a little bit, a lot of my childhood was about foraging. Go and pick the raspberries, go and pick the blackberries, go and forage for mushrooms, all those sorts of things. We were really remote. And so I go out in London, in the park with a cane, and when the brambles are out, I get pounds worth of brambles. And Dan said it's not worth it, the time it takes. No, but the joy it gives.
It is absolutely joy. And I also believe, it's a strange thing about talking against technology, but the more means of communication that we have, the less we're able to communicate.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is people are now burying themselves in screens.
Yeah.
They don't know how to converse. So I would absolutely have a technology for a moment. We'll come back to technology another time. But if you can have that sort of period where you can get rid of all of that sort of stuff and just engage in a conversation, sit down, play a board game from your childhood or whatever, that is the best.
I love a parlour game.
Something we neglect at our peril, isn't it? Like, we've got back into playing cards over Christmas and all of those things. And I remember I was talking to my brother about this weekend, like, we would just go out in the morning in our roller boots for the day.
There you go.
And sometimes I think maybe I should just wake up on a Sunday morning and go out on my roller boots for the day.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of things we need for our mental... We talk about mental health so much. Don't go on antidepressants.
Really simple. It doesn't cost anything on that sort of basis.
Can I say walking in the rain? I'm sorry, but roses in your cheeks.
I've been asking you all morning about this Twitter... I had a Twitter poll running about this move to provide discounts for your energy. If you cut your energy between 5 and 6 o'clock today, will you turn the heating off? Well, 82.3% of you say no, that you wouldn't be doing this. Interesting, isn't it? I've even had messages from people saying, because you are such a contrarian maverick crowd, I've had people saying, at 5 o'clock tonight, I'm going to turn my heating right up just to make a point.
Hey, I love it.
Andrew Eborn, Dr. Tessa Dunlop, thank you so much. I will see you again soon. Just after me is going to be Mark Longhurst, but I am Bev Turner. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10. Thanks for watching.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A bit of a north-south split with the weather at the moment. Scotland and Northern Ireland fairly cloudy, but milder air has arrived here. Still very cold across England and Wales.
but many areas sunny thanks to this area of high pressure. Around the top of it, though, low pressure systems, weather fronts just dancing across Scotland and Northern Ireland, bringing cloud, but not too much in the way of rain. Damp and drizzly in southwest Scotland, parts of the far northwest of England too, and some rain across the far north, but otherwise, as I said, dry. We've seen some thick fog through this morning over parts of southeast England. That'll only slowly clear. Some places may keep it all day. And quite cloudy conditions just brushing into the east of East Anglia and across the far southeast. It's cold in the south, 5-6 degrees if the fog sticks, barely getting above freezing, but double figures across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland where the cloud persists, and we'll keep a bit more drizzly rain across the far northwest overnight. Elsewhere further south, again, likely to see some thick fog patches in this zone from northeast England down to southwest Wales, southwest England to East Anglia. That's also the zone where it'll be coldest and frosty. A bit more cloud in the southeast means it won't be quite as cold perhaps here as last night. And another fairly mild one across Scotland and Northern Ireland, where again, tomorrow's mostly cloudy with patchy rain, but northeast Scotland may well see some brightness. Sunny spells developing for a good chunk of England and Wales, quite cloudy in the far southeast. Again, some stubborn fog patches both in the morning and perhaps lingering all day, keeping the temperatures at freezing. Even where it's sunny in the south, only 4 or 5 degrees, whereas further north, double figures, perhaps even milder than today, 11, perhaps even 12 Celsius. We'll keep that contrast going through Tuesday evening as well. There's a weather front just across the far north pushing in as we go into Wednesday. That will mix things up a little bit, bringing some patchy rain south into parts of northern England in particular during Wednesday, and slowly switching the temperature, so turning a little milder in the south, meanwhile turning colder further north.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.